Welcome, and thanks for joining me today on Mortgage Manager Playbook, a podcast for sales leaders who want to improve their team's sales performance and originate more loans. I'm Pat Sherlock, your host. Welcome to today's podcast. Today we're going to talk about the important topic, and I can't emphasize this enough, no customer referrals. We're going to talk why that happens and how to correct it. And I have the perfect person. That's Mike Seminari. Mike is Director of Customer Experience at STRATMOR. He's well known in our industry. He has these terrific articles all the time on LinkedIn, and I'm thrilled to talk to him today. So hi, Mike.
Hi, great to be here, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk about this because it looks like as we're seeing somewhat of a mini refi market happening and the wonderful world of customer referrals. Oftentimes what I see, as I mentioned to you before, is that loan officers really don't work their database. So it's amazing to me, but that's the reality of it. So talk about how do you wow a customer? And I know you've done all the research in this topic.
Yeah, so I think a good place to start would be where we're expecting our business to come from. And we've been in a purchase environment for so long that all of that, a lot of that emphasis was put on our realtor or referral partners to feed us that business. And what I've seen in a lot of the conversations I've had with LOs and lenders is that they're underwhelmed with the number of referrals they've been getting. You know, part of that's the market, but a lot of that's not the market. It's the assumption or anticipation after you do a great job for a customer that they will naturally just want to talk about you to friends and family and refer business to you. And when that doesn't happen, then you start thinking, well, do I need to ask for it? Do I need to go, every time and say, well, who are the people? And, what can I do to generate that interest? Or do I need to go search for new realtor referral partners, and build that stable up, if you will. And the overwhelming feeling that I'm seeing is kind of like hands up in the air, like, why am I not getting more referrals? I feel like I'm doing everything right. I feel like my customers love me. And so I have some, interesting data that we've gleaned in the last 10 years or so, millions of borrowers, on why that happens. And it's surprising to a lot of LOs that it actually takes more than having that borrower really like you at the end of the day.
Well, I know you've done work on liking, and this is where you're really going on knowing and liking you and trusting you, that it seems as if that isn't enough. And why don't you elaborate a little bit more? What is it that, if that's not enough, what is it that they need to
Yeah.
do and that they're not doing? And it's not enough to send a Christmas card or a birthday
Yeah.
card. So
Well, I think for a long time, even back, say, 10 years ago, we started getting a lot of testimonials, putting them out and increasing our brand recognition, even our personal brand,
sure.
that awareness. And there is just the assumption that would lead to, if my name is out there, my work is out there, that will lead to more referrals and more repeat business. What I think we failed to do is distinguish between the someone liking you and someone being a raving fan about you. And that difference is, I think the easiest way to distill that would be between somebody who's prompted for a referral and somebody who's offering referrals and word of mouth going and talking about you. And that's really, seems nuanced, but it really is a big difference between, often think of going out for a steak dinner. If someone asks me for a recommendation of a great restaurant in my area, I will have one or two, names of restaurants to give them. But for me to go out and just start talking about it of my own volition without being prompted is really just a different level of delight that you need to do. And so when we are coaching LOs and at the high level in lenders, we are often having that conversation. What defines delight, or what defines, that unprompted referral that you really want? That's the gold here. The prompted is not going to get you much business, unfortunately. So to get a prompted referral, you might do a great job for your customer, but they may have had a so-so process. One or two things may have gone wrong, but they like you because you've been in the trenches with them. You've been kind of there answering their questions, responsive, all the things you would expect of of a good loan officer, not a great loan officer, a good loan officer. And
Mm-hmm.
they trust you. They're giving you their financials. And a lot of us, a lot of LOs think that is where the bar is.
Mm-hmm.
They like me, they trust me, they treat me well, they smile, whatever. But really, the word of mouth referrals come in the higher levels
Yeah.
where you are delighting them. So, what does it mean to delight somebody? You have to play in the unexpected. So whatever you're buying out in the world, whatever you're spending money on, if you're spending a lot of money and you get what you expect,
Yeah.
you're generally not delighted, right? If you spend a little money and get a lot of value, you are delighted. Or, so there has to be
Mm-hmm.
that separation of what's unexpected and what's expected. And so when we're coaching LOs, we talk about what's going to delight the customer, what's going to be unexpected for them. And
Mm-hmm.
there's two themes that typically come up. And I read a lot of testimonials, and the phrases that I see are, I couldn't believe how simple of a process it was. So read between the lines. It was not complicated. It was not
Yeah.
hurtful and painful. It was easy breezy, simple. I couldn't believe it because I was expecting it to be
Mm-hmm.
painful. So if you can delight them in that way, kind of like going to the dentist where you're going to get a filling or a root canal or something, you're not expecting that to be a great delight, an easy, painless
Mm-hmm.
experience. If it is, I imagine you would tell people that, like, I had this big procedure. I couldn't believe how easy it was, how painless it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's when you're gonna actually, you have to live in the unexpected. So part of that, what we've seen in our data is that when you are doing everything right in the process, and by everything I just mean like 6 or 7 things. If you keep an eye on a certain number of things, I'd be happy to share a link with your
Mm-hmm.
listeners as a follow up here. But we have articles and things on this stuff. But there's about 7 things. If you get them all right, it's like, did they get a checklist? Did the closing start on time? Did they ever, did they have to call in for their own updates or not? Did they get a call prior to closing to go over the final numbers? Those types of things. You'd be surprised how much NPS, or the likelihood to recommend, that raving score statistic,
Mm-hmm.
fluctuates if one of those things happens or doesn't happen. And if you get even one of those wrong, so take call prior to closing to go over final numbers, you go from an 85 NPS, which is really high, to -10. So that's about almost 100-point swing just because one thing went wrong. At the
Mm-hmm.
same time, in parallel, they can love the loan officer,
Right.
and yet that likelihood to recommend score drops off of a cliff. And so what we, when we talk to LOs, it's part of it's like a jaw drop moment. Like, wait, what's happening? I had this customer who loves me, and yet now they're not willing to recommend me or my company. What happened? Well, that one thing happened. And it's like, if you get all 7 of these things that we monitor for companies through our Mortgage CX program, if you get all of these things right, you get high 90s on the NPS scale.
Mm-hmm.
That is not just somebody who likes you. That's somebody who is delighted by an easy, smooth, simple process where nothing went wrong. Now, we have companies who get that, all 7 of those things right a third of the time, half the time. Average is maybe around half the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that says the other half of the time something's going wrong that's crushing your ability to get
Yeah.
referrals. So that's not a good level to be at. We have other companies that are, some of our clients have won JD Power awards and things like that for customer satisfaction. Those companies, they manage to these things. They have been doing so for several years, and they have maybe 75% of their loans that they do hit perfectly those 7 things because they're looking and managing to them. And their referrals, their retention is 60-70%
Mm-hmm.
because they do some of their own servicing. They have great repeat customers, great referrals happening. There is a formula that is showing success if you're focusing on the process. So that's one thing, is the process. The other thing we can talk about in a minute is how to wow your customers, not just to surprise them or delight them, but how to actually go above and beyond for them.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second, but I'm curious, when you talk about the process from the loan officer's standpoint, they might say, well, gee, some of that I don't have any control over.
Mm,
It's kind of left up to the ops side. And that part of it is somebody else's, that's that other side. And so
yeah,
how do we address that issue? Because the wowing isn't going to happen if the process isn't right.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have to look at it as not as this is my fault or my responsibility
Hmm.
or not, and more as these are roadblocks for the customer.
Hmm.
Whether it's my fault or not, or my responsibility or not, it's my job as the LO to remove the roadblocks so that I can get referrals. If there are roadblocks, the referrals are not going to flow. So in that sense, classic example would be somebody didn't get a checklist of documents
Right.
that they needed to provide. Well, those are all automated. Of course they got it, right? As long as they have a valid email, they got it. But we don't know if their spouse opened it up and deleted it. We don't know
Hmm.
if they went to a spam folder or junk folder. We don't know if they took one look and got busy and then never went back to it, right? So it's all about the perception of the customer, not necessarily did that thing happen. So another example would be processor called the customer to go over final figures, but they didn't get a hold of the customer. They left a message. Customer never called them back or didn't get that message. I don't
Hmm.
know. My iPhone sometimes delivers messages 3 days later. So these things happen, right? So it's more so that you're letting the LO know that we're on your side, we're on your team. We want these roadblocks to be removed, and we want to give you visibility. And if you don't have visibility of this stuff, you're dead in the water. But if you do have visibility, that at least gives them the option of double checking with the customer. So when we give them monthly scorecard or reports and things like that, they'll see if any of these things went wrong, and they'll start to think, well, if this is hurting my ability to get referrals, I can have two paths to get referrals. I can either go recruit more,
Yeah.
or I can do a perfect job on the process. And it's a lot easier for most of them to monitor that process a little bit. Sure, it's an extra phone call, email, text here and there, but it's way easier than going and cold calling realtors. So if you
Hmm.
just delight people, we're talking 2 or 3 things that you might need to keep an eye on out of the 7, right? You're probably doing 3 or 4 of them perfectly already. So it's not that much extra lift to just
Hmm.
call somebody and be like, hey, I I wanted to make sure you saw and read the checklist. We know that's really important to
Right.
delight. And if you didn't see it, we know that's really detrimental. And so I just wanted to make sure you saw it and read it, right? Or setting up a time to go, tell the processor you're working with in general, or the processing team, don't just call the customer and leave a message. Say it's imperative that we set up 15 minutes to go over your final CD. And if we don't, then we may need to hold up closing even, or whatever.
Sure.
We need to do this, and that will ensure that gets done, ensure that 85 instead of -10. And night and day, that person is now delighted because you really gave them hospitality and not just service.
So, Mike, what would you say in numbers standpoint? In my experience, that about a third of the production that your better originators have comes from referrals or these people that are wowed. Is that consistent with your data that when you look at the production is coming at least a third from people that were wowed? Is that still accurate?
Yeah. So the metric of were they wowed or not, I guess I would have to fall back to the fact that they were referred by someone means somebody else was wowed, right? by
Hmm.
by the service, so, and therefore made a referral. But it's we track, we track all of
Hmm.
these things. How did you find your lender? Why did
Sure.
you choose your lender? And the numbers for a referral from a realtor are almost a third. At least in the purchase market's higher, and refi it's lower. So it averages out to about a third across the market. But when you add other personal networking kind of things, like
Hmm.
I've worked with the LO before, I've worked with the lender before, have a relationship with them in some form or fashion. So the personal, I know the lender already, or my friends, family, colleagues, add that to the realtor referrals, you get a combined about 90% of deals of loans are coming in from those personal connections, which I would attribute to experience. Either you had a good experience yourself, or somebody you know and trust had a good experience. One of those two things is contributing to that choice. And so it's really, you know, we ask people looking at the percentage of people who say, I did an online search for local lenders, 3%. People who say, I read online reviews and made my decision based on that, 3%. So everything else added up together is less than 10% of the total, which means personal brand, although it's good for vetting once they've kind of narrowed down their choices, make sure they have some good reviews. Adds some value, but it's not helping people find you typically. The finding of the LO is almost always 90% of the time personal network. And most LOs don't realize that. Right. So that's part of why I think the sales model is broken, is that we put all this money into personal brand and how big can I have my circle of influence and my visibility. And yet that's 3%, 6% tops. That is a business that is coming in because of that. It's really the other aspects of delight, which is driven not by testimonials, but by word of mouth referrals. And so if we want to fix this and start that referral train going again, we really need to focus on process and wowing the customer.
We'll talk about wowing the customer, and then I want to talk about, again, the fixing part, because obviously the run-of-the-mill loan officer and the run-of-the-mill institutions don't obviously do a good job when so many people don't refer, which is what is pretty typical. So talk about the wowing part first. How do you wow the unexpected?
Yeah, so there are maybe 10% of LOs that are just great at this. I like to use the word hospitality because it just has it's an elevated feel. When I read comments and testimonials from borrowers, I see things like, oh, they treated me like family, which is just a different level of care, right? I felt like I could call them anytime, day or night. Or they went above and beyond, is that other phrase that I see a lot, which is, I see things like, they looked up insurance rates for me and sent me quotes for insurance. They didn't need to do that. It wasn't part of their job description, but they did it. And, they looked at different loan programs for me that I wasn't even considering, or whatever it is. It's something that's above and beyond. The easiest and best way to do that, in my opinion, is to treat them as you would a friend. Maybe share something appropriately personal in your life, like, this is what I did this weekend, what did you do? But you find out something personal about them, that information you might share with a friend. They will typically respond by sharing something about themselves, and then remember that and refer to it later. You build an emotional connection with somebody when you share things about your life. You are no longer just a nameless, faceless. You start to become a friend.
So this isn't like showing up at a birthday party unexpected. No.
No, that might be a little creepy.
That's a little creepy. We don't want that. Okay, so talk about fixing this issue. And it just seems like, is it the problem that we have 40% turnover of loan officers in our industry, that we're not able to get the concept of that we need to, in other words, wow our customers to make our life easier as loan officers? It just seems like a basic concept that why aren't lenders and loan officers doing it?
You want the blunt answer?
Yeah, the blunt answer.
It's because there's a degree of laziness, I think, which also could be characterized as opportunist, meaning as a loan officer, you want the quickest, fastest, easiest way to your next paycheck, to your next deal. And when there are companies out there, the whole movement of self-promotion and visibility and all that stuff is attractive because it says, I put a little content out there, let's stay away from content. More so, a third party, another company is offering to market for me, produce content that goes out for me without me doing anything. So that's like auto posting of testimonials to different feeds and
Sure.
things like that. And it with the promise of almost passive income. So passively, I don't have to do anything. This company is going to market and promote me and give me visibility and drive people to me. And that's a very enticing or, attractive thing to
Mm-hmm.
a loan officer who says, maybe I'll pay a little bit of money for this third party to do my marketing, drive me business, and I'll get more money at the end of the day. It's outsourcing it, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is that we haven't seen that model actually work. And so the model that does work, really investing in the relationship with your customer, your existing customer, doing things that are above and beyond that take extra effort and take being thoughtful and take sometimes a little bit of investment and money. Those things are harder to do, and they're long play things that
Mm-hmm.
may not pay off very in the short term. So that's I think that's my best guess at why we have a broken sales model, is that we're hoping, we're fingers crossed, if I get this technology, or if I outsource my marketing to this, in this way, it should drive me more business. And then kind of like what's going on? Why am I not getting business? A frustration around, I don't know if you've seen that with the LOs you work with, but oftentimes there's frustration. I should be getting referrals. Why am I not getting more referrals? And the answer is typically because
Mm-hmm.
are you really delighting your customers to the degree that they're surprised and delighted, not just happy, but surprised and delighted.
Surprised. Gotcha. So I'm interested about your research and your thoughts on. So therefore, if you're trying to establish an emotional connection, and let's assume, forget you're not outsourcing it, but would it be true to say, let's say the loan officers that go on TikTok, or let's say the loan officers, they're sharing their life, they have
Yeah.
YouTube channels. Do you see that those where the person actually knows them before the actual loan sequence would start, that type of emotional connection is something that a sending out through a CRM emails that everybody else gets doesn't really
Mhm.
do anything. Whereas that is something that the loan officer themselves is really sharing themselves. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that if done the right way, it can be really effective. So you are basically creating a persona or a fan base
Right.
for, and any time you do that in the world, that's a good thing. The more people that know you, they think of you when they think of those things. The one piece of advice I would give is you need to be creating value, not just
Sure.
being. There are certain people in the world that are so beautiful, that they can just talk about their life and people want to listen, right? I'm not one of those. There's not a lot of people out there like that, but they do exist. They're anomalies. The
Sure.
people that really create great business models around what they're doing are constantly adding value to their base. So if you're a local loan officer, it could be something as simple as, I go out with my, when I do loans for people, I often take them out for a meal. These are my top 5 favorite places in my community to do that. That's at least providing some value to somebody, even though
Sure.
it's not directly related to mortgage, right? So if you're going to do about your personal life and share those things, still add value. And if it's, there's a lot of people now giving mortgage advice and things like that. But if you have great mortgage advice, share it, right? Something that would be, there's a whole world of how you hook people and how you,
Sure.
the time and all, there's rules around all that. Probably chat GPT could give you all that stuff, but um, it's, I do think there's value in it. I don't think many people are using it
They're
well.
not. No, I see it in classes, and that's why I asked the question, is
Yeah.
that we have a part of doing a video, and it's shocking to me how many have never done a video in this
Yeah.
world. I mean, you and I are doing videos.
Yeah.
But I mean, really. So talk about future trends, because I think, how do you see the customer experience? What do you think if you were looking out 5 years from now? What's
Mhm.
this all going to mean?
Of course, AI has to be part of that, right? So I think part of that, what I'm seeing is an early trend is, if you have a call center, you have telephony, you're recording those calls. There's just so much you can learn and so much coaching you can do outside of recording and having telephony and things like that. It's much harder. So the loan officer on their cell phone, it's going to be harder to capture all that. But for those centralized models, they're learning so much. They're able to now get all of the information. And I know Rocket is doing something like this where they're pre-filling the application for people based on the phone call. So it's like hands-free. The person taking the application doesn't even have to do anything. There's AI. There are companies that are listening, actively listening, and then looking at sentiment. So this person was emotional about this topic. You didn't. You should show some emotional support to them here. You didn't ask about this. There's other companies who want to make sure that they're stating things like the vision statement of the company or whatever, and it'll know if you did that or not. So I think that the telephony and the AI listening and coaching and capture of information is something that we'll see proliferate. In the same way, if you may not need to ask people as many questions about the process if you're picking some of that stuff up along the way. Now, that without telephony, I think we're probably gonna see more coaching and personalization of results. That's where STRATMOR has tried to get ahead of the game here. Is it's great to have basic data. It's better to have rich data where you can look at insights about the process. Even better to have that benchmarked against peers so you know where to set goals and benchmarks. But it's even better because you can get all those first three steps and still have nothing until you personalize it and engage the employees more. So I imagine more companies will go towards this model of how do we engage our employees in creating delight
and holding them responsible.
Yeah,
I do think it has to come back to compensation issues where you reward for that. And I don't.
Well, that's all going to change too, I think. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, it's been, well, we have some great articles from STRATMOR. We won't get into the compensation, but we've been paying people a lot. I think with the refi, the next refi wave that comes around, there's going to be lower compensation for the refis because they're just way easier and to snap through.
Well, we'll have to have you come back and talk about that because I think people will do behaviors based upon how they get compensated. And we have rewarded transactional relationships, and that doesn't work in this new world with a lot of competition. So I think you're right on. So Mike, how can people get a hold of you? And obviously any type of customer experience, you're the guy to talk to.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Mike Seminari, and we have our STRATMORgroup.com website where we have more information about Mortgage CX. I do a monthly article with a kind of a mailing list. So if people want to be part of that, you can sign up for that on our website at STRATMORgroup.com. Or just give me a call. I'd love to talk this stuff. I'd love to talk shop, whether it's for a podcast or whether it's just to shoot the breeze and strategize with people. So this is what I love to do.
Well, I love to have you. I love having you on, and I appreciate you sharing the concepts. And these really are must-do concepts now. And I do think that we can improve productions just by wowing the customer. I mean, it just seems fundamental. So anyway, I want to thank you for sharing it. And I certainly want to thank our listeners. If you would like to subscribe and listen to some more podcasts, go to patsherlock.com. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks for listening to Mortgage Manager Playbook. You can catch up on all our episodes by subscribing to receive each week a new show. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and team members. If you're looking to increase production, call me to discuss my prospecting sales training program, Ramping Up Realtor Referral Sources. Check out my website, www.patsherlock.com.